Hello and welcome to Tap That MTG, the show where we tell you everything we know about Magic the Gathering that's probably wrong but fun to talk about. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Shauna.
And today we are going to bring you another deep dive into one of the new precons. These ones are from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. And in this video, we're just going to break down all the cards in this deck, talk about what the deck is meant to do, maybe some tips on how to use it wisely. And if you wait till the end, we have some tweaks to offer that might make the deck just a little bit better. As always, we really want to know what you think as well. So please feel free to let us know in the comments or on Twitter and Facebook how you would tweak this deck or if you're excited about playing with it. But first, Shauna, what is this deck and what is it meant to do? Who's our commander?
This is the Exit from Exile red and green deck with Baldur, the Dread Wolf Herald. Everyone who knows me knows I love my wolves. So this is a 3/3 for 1 red and a green human druid that says whenever you cast a spell from exile or land enters the battlefield under your control from exile, you get to create a wolfy boy, a 2/2 wolf, a green one. And you can pay 1 and tap it and discard a card, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. So this is all about putting your cards in exile and playing them from there, this whole deck. So it takes a little planning, but it could potentially be quite explosive because you're going to be filling your deck with, or your playing field with lots of wolves, not werewolves, wolves. So yeah, your plan is to overrun your opponent basically for get lots of value here.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So well, if we look at the guts of this deck, we like to kind of show you some stats. So the first stat we'll look at is our mana curve. It's got a decent mana curve. There's quite a few cards that are 6 and up, actually 5 and up, but we still have a lot in the 2 and 3 category as well. So it's kind of like a weird S-shaped mana curve. 1 and 1, 9 and 2, 18 and 3, 12 and 4, 7 and 5, and 14 and 6. So you will need some mana ramp in order to get to that, mana ramp in order to get to those bigger ones. But again, you get value for playing lands. So there's some stuff for that in this deck as well. Color breakdown, we have 24 red, 28 green, 5 multicolored, and 4 colorless. So fairly even in green and red as far as colors go, mostly green or more in green, I guess. And then as far as our card types go, this is the first commander deck that I can remember that has 2 planeswalkers in it. So we have 2, and we'll see who those are later. We have 28 creatures, which seems pretty low, but remember, you're making 2/2 wolves every time you play a land or something from exile. You have 20 instants and sorceries, 7 enchantments, and 4 artifact cards. So that's your breakdown of cards in this deck. Another thing we want to just kind of share with you before we get started is a commander formula that we like to evaluate based on. What's that all about, Shauna?
Yeah, so most of these decks that Wizards make seems to follow this formula that we also use to evaluate decks and plan our decks that we make. So it's not always the case, but most of the time we find they follow this, and we like to we use it all the time when we make decks. So we've got our commander, of course, and then we have ramp cards, about 15 of those. 15 removal cards, could be targeted, could be mass removal. Card draw, 13 of those or so. And the high impact cards, those are the game winning cards, those about 12 of those. And then you've got about 10 other theme supporting type cards that are going to help you win the game. And then about 34 land is kind of the formula that we look at when we build decks and when we're evaluating these decks. So yeah. So what's our first?
Our first section is ramp, mana ramp, and mana generators. So formula says 15. Our deck has 13. The very first one happens to be one of those planeswalkers that we talked about. So Xenagos the Reveler. For 4, he's a 3 loyalty planeswalker. It means he starts with kind of 3 life or 3 loyalty counters. You can add a loyalty counter to him and add X mana in any combination of red or green to your mana pool, where X is the number of creatures you control. So hopefully you'll have lots, and then you'll have lots of mana to spend, making him bigger and bigger. He does have a 0, so he'll just like stay status quo, and maybe you don't have a lot of creatures out yet, or someone's just on a board wipe. You can just create a little 2/2 green satyr creature token with haste and put it on the battlefield. And then it's -6 is exile the top 7 cards of your library. You may put any number of creatures and or land cards from among them onto the battlefield. That is free. You don't have to pay for them.
Nice.
So lands as well as creatures for free, which is great. Plus you exile them and then put them onto the battlefield. So that's going to trigger your commander.
So does it trigger the commander? I'm just thinking here because it's whenever you cast a spell from exile or play
Is it cast? Does it say cast?
It says cast a spell or a land enters the battlefield. So if it's a land, exile, so. A land would probably be okay, but you're not really casting those spells. So
yeah,
right? Would you agree?
Yeah, you don't. It doesn't say without paying your mana cost. So you're putting any number of creatures and or land cards from among them onto the battlefield. Yeah. But the lands would trigger.
The lands would definitely trigger for sure. Okay. Alrighty. So I just was thinking that as you were reading that, I was like, The Sakura Tribe Elder. This is the typical Steve that everybody calls him. You can sacrifice him and go searching for a basic land card and put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. He's a little sacrificial lamb for you to go get a land. So
Nature's Lore is also going to do that for you for 2 mana cost. It's a sorcery. Search for a forest and put that card onto the battlefield and shuffle.
And the Beanstalk Giant. So we learned while we were going through this that adventure cards are great cards for this deck because they technically, when you play their sorcery side, they're being played then for their creature side from exile. So Beanstalk Giant is a perfect creature for this deck. On its sorcery side, it's got its Fertile Footsteps, and that's the one where you go and search for a basic land and put it on the battlefield that's not tapped, which is really handy. And then you can pay 7, and he comes back out from his exiled adventure, triggering your commander, and his power and toughness is equal to the number of lands you control. So why not?
Cultivate is another sorcery that you can search your library for 2 basic lands, reveal those, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle. If you haven't played a land per turn yet, you can play that other one right away as well. Again, triggering exile, any of those land matter things like Beanstalk Giant just gets you extra lands for that.
Kodama's Reach for 2 and a green. It is the typical sorcery that search for up to 2 basic lands, reveal, put one on the battlefield and one in your hand. Very handy.
I see what you did there. Search for Tomorrow for 3 is a sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle your library. This also has Suspend 2. So if you'd like, rather than cast this card from your hand, you may pay 1 green in this case and exile it with 2 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter from it, and when the last one is removed, you get to cast it without paying its mana cost. So you're exiling it, just putting it off to the side for 1, and then because it's going to be cast from exile, you're going to trigger your commander with it.
Nice. Terramorph for 3 and a green. It's a sorcery that says search your library for basic land card, put it in the battlefield, then shuffle, and it has Rebound, which means if you cast the spell from your hand, you get to exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you get to cast it again from exile without paying its mana cost. So pretty awesome.
Pretty awesome, and it's going to trigger your commander. So another thing to, I guess, think about with this deck is none of those things are going to trigger your commander if your commander is not on the battlefield.
Right.
So get your commander out on the battlefield as early as you can and try and keep him out. 3 visits for 2 is search your library for a forest card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. It's not tapped, so you can use it right away.
Nice. Venture Forth, 3 and a green, sorcery, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a land card. put that card on the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library. There you go, a
Mm-hmm.
trigger in a
Yeah.
random order, and then you exile this with 3 time counters on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're suspending it for 3. So then you get to play it again.
Yeah, so you can play it for suspend and just wait, and then basically once it resolves,
Right.
you're just going to keep putting it back, and that's one of those cards that continually gets you land and continually resolves
Over and over again.
continually from exile. So that's going to be some really good mana ramp for you.
Sheesh,
as well
I didn't
as
realize you
triggering.
got to do it over and over again. So
Yeah.
didn't even see that.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then Servok's Tome, when it enters the battlefield, you get to take the initiative. You can add a colorless mana to tap and add a colorless mana if you have the initiative. You get to add 2 instead. And it has pay 3 of any color, tap it, and exile a card from the top of your library. Until you exile a non-land card, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Activate only if you've completed a dungeon. So lots of things happening on that. First of all, there's initiative, which is new with this set. It kind of works like the Monarch in the sense that if somebody does combat damage, they're going to take it from you. And basically what initiative means is at the beginning of your upkeep, you're going to venture into Undercity, which is a new dungeon that has come out, which helps you complete that dungeon. Basically, every upkeep, you're going to just keep venturing through the dungeon. If someone steals your initiative, you're going to want to take it back, because once you've completed a dungeon, you can then cast things from exile for free each turn.
Nice.
At least once for 3. So you're going to get big things for free. It's pretty
Very
awesome.
Then we've got our 2 commander deck staples that we love to get in these decks. There's the Arcane Signet for 2 that can tap for any mana in your commander's color identity. Soul Ring for 1, which taps for 2 colorless. So put those 2 together, like Leslie always cheats out, you'll be good.
I've never gotten both of them.
Everybody's dream.
Everybody's dream.
All
All right. And our next section is a section that we both think is probably the most important section in most commander decks or magic games in general, is our removal section. We have formula calls for about 15. Our deck has 14, so we're right on par there. And we're going to start things off with Bone Crusher Giant for 3 mana. You're going to get a 4/3. He has an adventure, so you can do 2 damage to any target, including their face. Stick him out on an adventure and then cast him for his 3 mana and get a little dude. When he's on the battlefield, if he becomes the target of a spell, he deals 2 damage to that opponent's controller. So, yeah. Opponent's controller. Their husband or wife, no. To the opponent.
That's right. Then we've got the Dire Fleet, Daredevil,
Wow.
Pirates. For 1 and a red, it is a 2/1 first strike. When he enters the battlefield, you get to exile target instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast it this turn. And you may spend mana or mana of any type to cast that spell. If that spell would be put into this graveyard, exile it instead. It's a great way to steal their best little instant or sorcery and make it happen for yourself, which is from exile. So, you get to have your commander go off as well.
Woot woot. Embereth Shieldbreaker is also another adventure card. Yeah. So we're going to pay 1, destroy target artifact, which is always handy in Commander. There's always almost an artifact on the battlefield that someone needs to get rid of. I would absolutely recommend that you do this, even if the only thing to destroy someone's soul ring or something like that.
Don't be mean.
It's very mean to do that, but and there are better targets, so don't just pick that because you're mean to someone, but because you want to put it on its adventure so that you can play it from exile and get triggers happening. So otherwise, who cares about the little 2/1?
Then we have this little Mizium Mortars for 1 and a red. It is a sorcery that deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control. Or you can cast it for its overload cost, which is 3 and 3 red. And if you cast it for that cost, you get to change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So that would be 4 damage to each creature you don't control. Good board wipe there.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Azuri's Perdition for 5 and 3 green is another potential board wipe. Basically, for each creature your opponents control, you create a 4/4 green beast creature token, and each of those beasts fights a different one of those creatures. So everything on the that your opponents have is fighting a beast, and whoever survives survives. So,
It's just a big brawl.
but it's wolfies, right? Or no, it's beasts.
It's
But
beasts.
it look
Yeah,
like
it should be
wolves.
wolves.
It should be wolves.
Demon Bolt for 2 and a red. It is an instant that says you deal 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you can foretell this. So that is for 1 red. So that is that means that you can pay 2 and exile this card. There's that keyword again, and then pay just 1 for it to come back on another turn later on to do 4 damage to something, and at instant speed, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely foretell that. Beast Within, another beast card. For 3, it's an instant. Destroy target permanents. Its controller gets a 3/3 beast, so you're going to destroy something of theirs and give them a beast, which is super nice of you.
Yeah. Oh, pardon me. For 4 and a green, this is Natural Reclamation, and it's an instant that has Cascade. So I always have trouble understanding this, but Cascade is when you cast this spell, you get to exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less than this one. Then you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exiled cards on the bottom of your library in random order. So just let you get more stuff, I guess. At 5 mana,
you
you're
just
going
get
to
to
hit something.
cast a non-land. And this one's a non-land card, so it could be an instant or sorcery. Sometimes it's a creature card, or sometimes it's something else for the Cascade. But
Yeah. And then you destroy target artifact or enchantment with this card, so that's kind of handy.
And Chaos Wand. Everyone likes a Chaos Wand for 3. This has 4 and tap to target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library. Until they exile an instant or sorcery card, you may cast that spell without paying its mana cost, so free is always good. Then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way at the bottom of the that library in random order. So you're going to pay 4, you're going to tap it, and you're going to cast a random instant or sorcery. So kind of crazy there, but it is coming from exile, so it's going to trigger your commander.
There's a little bit of stealing going on in this deck, which is kind of fun. Stolen Strategy, an enchantment that says it's a 4 and a red for 4 and a red, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of each opponent's library. Until end of turn, you may cast non-land cards from among them. And you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. So, more stealing. Steal.
And Warstorm Surge is a card that everyone loves to hate for 6. Once it's on the battlefield, you gotta get rid of it. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So
mean.
Just removal, constant.
Delayed Blast Fireball for 1 and 2 red. It is definitely a Dungeons and Dragons type card, I think. It has delay. It deals 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control, which is mean. If the spell was cast from exile, it deals 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control instead. And it has foretell of 6. So you could pay this extra cost to do that, or you could just have this one of those ones that you cheat out of a graveyard, which is really, really mean. Oh my god.
Green Slime is a little ooze that costs 3. It does have flash, so you can play it at instant speed at any time. It's a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, counter target activated or triggered ability from an artifact or enchantment source. So it's very specific there and what you're actually going to do. If a permanent's ability is countered this way, destroy that permanent. So first of all, it has foretell. So you should foretell it. Put it aside. For 2, you can foretell it, then its foretell cost is only 1. You can do that at any time. So, what is an activated ability and a triggered ability? So, an activated ability is an ability that you have to activate. So, perhaps it's pay to and tap it, or pay to and this happens. A triggered ability is something that happens like on your commander, where something comes in from exile and oh, that happens. So, it triggers your commander to happen. So, that's the basics of activated versus triggered abilities, and this is specific to artifacts or enchantment sources. So you have to kind of watch what's happening on the battlefield and think about your timing if you're going to play that correctly.
Right. Then we have Volcanic Torrent for 4 and a red. It is a sorcery that has Cascade, so there's that Cascade again. And Volcanic Torrent deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker your opponents control, where X is the number of spells you've cast this turn. Woo! So with that Cascade, on top of Cascade, which happens when people do that, it's so confusing, but could work for you.
Yeah. And our next section, huzzah, card draw and tutors. These are things that are going to obviously draw you cards. Tutors are things that allow you to scry or go search your deck or just have information about what's coming. So the first one, the formula says that we should have 13. This deck only has about 6, so we're only at about half there. Which is something you might want to think about tweaking a little bit later after you've played it a few times. But Izzet Chemister is our first one. For 3 mana, you have a 1/3. It has haste, so you can do its tap ability right off the bat, which is pay 1, tap it, exile target instant or sorcery from your graveyard. And then you can pay 2 and tap the next turn and cast any number of cards exiled with Izzet's Chemister without paying their mana cost. So you can just keep piling them up, cast as many as you want. You're going to take them from your graveyard, so you can cast them again from your graveyard, which is great. And because they're exiled, they're going to trigger your commander.
Cool. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Ooh. Crazy. Explore for 1 and a green. It's a sorcery that says you may play an additional land and you get to draw a card. Everybody loves it.
Simple. Escape the Wilds for 5 is a sorcery. You exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may play cards exiled this way until the end of your next turn, and you may play an additional land this turn. So your land, if you exile it, can be played from there. You get an extra land if one of those happens to be it, and all of those cards are now exiled and come in from exile for your commander.
It was a good card in Standard, and it's a good card now.
Good card here, yep.
Return of the Wild Speaker for 4 and a green. He is a little instant here that says choose 1, draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or your non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. So that's, yeah. I've used that one a lot.
Yeah, especially remember we're building a very wide board here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
An Outpost Siege for 4 is an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you get to choose cons or dragons. If you choose cons, then at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to exile the top card of your library until the end of turn. You may play that card. And dragons, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to any target. I highly recommend you choose cons if you choose this.
Durnan of the Yawning Portal. This is a new card, a 3/3 for 3 and a green. It is a human warrior. And whenever Durnan attacks, you look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may exile a creature card from among them. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may cast it. And that spell has Undaunted. So that means it costs 1 less to cast for each opponent. So it could potentially be quite a bit less. And you have to choose a background. So that's new to this set, where you can have a background, which is usually like it's not usually a creature, and it's an enchantment or something like that. And you can have that paired with a card like this one to be your commanders as well. So in this case, for this deck, you would need a red background to continue with the red and green of this deck. So there you go.
And our next section is high impact cards. We recommend that you have about 12, and this deck has 13, so we're right on par there. And what it has in it is really, really high impact. So the first one is Dream Pillager for 7. It's a 4/4. It has flying, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you get to exile that many cards from the top of your library, and until the end of your turn, you may cast spells from among those cards. So when you have this on the battlefield, I know a lot of times it's like, let's play all my cards during my main phase, my first main phase, and then I'm going to attack, and then I'm going to maybe do something in my second. Because you're going to exile a bunch of cards after this guy does damage, maybe hold your mana until your second main phase so that you
Mm-hmm.
can actually do some of it. Because once they're in exile, it says only until the end of turn, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're gone if you don't cast them. So
Use your head.
yeah, second main phase is okay.
Yes, it's okay to play stuff. Atali, this is an awesome elder dinosaur we all love to hate. It's a 6/6 for 6. Big boy. Whenever he attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. And you may cast any number of those for free. Woohoo!
Free. And they're all exiled and coming in from
It's
exile.
crazy. Yeah.
We also have another. This one is Greater Gargadon for 10. He's 10 mana
The
cost,
big guy.
9/7, but you're not going to pay him for the 10. You're going to suspend him for 1. So you're going to just kind of put 10 counters on him, and 10 turns later, he's going to come in as a 9/7, sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land, remove a time counter from Greater Gargadon. So there's other ways of reducing his cost or getting rid of those
Mm-hmm.
counters. Um, so yeah,
If
get him
your creature's
faster.
going to die anyways, just sacrifice it before it
Yeah,
dies, right?
and he comes in from exile.
So
So
good. So
yeah.
good. Layla the Blade Forged for 2 and a red. It's a 2/2 spirit warrior that has haste. And whenever she attacks, you exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever you exile one or more cards from your library and or graveyard, you put a counter on her. So she gets a
Mm-hmm.
counter as soon as she attacks, pretty much. Yeah. No. Yes.
Whenever
No,
you
no.
exile one or more cards from your library or
Yeah, so
graveyard.
you're
So
exiling it. So regardless, when she attacks, she gets the counter, even if you
mm-hmm.
don't play it. Use
Yeah.
that.
Plus
Use that.
all those other times you're exiling cards, she gets
Yep.
1/1
Get
counters
the
as well. So
counters.
she's
Yep.
gonna get really big.
Definitely.
Tectonic Giant for 4 is a 3/4, and whenever he attacks, becomes the target of a spell or an opponent controls, you get to choose one. You can do 3 damage to each opponent, or you can exile the top 2 cards of your library and choose one of them until the end of your turn, until the end of your next turn, so it can just stay there until you need to it. You may play that card.
Crazy.
So again, you probably want to choose the second one, but maybe you just
Mm-hmm.
want to do that 3 damage to everybody.
Yep. Urabrask the Hidden, a 4/4 for 3 and 2 red. Creatures you control have haste. Very handy. You're going to do lots of attacking here.
Mm-hmm.
Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Nice.
Yeah.
And they're
Nice.
not. Ha ha.
Mm-hmm. Remember, every time you're exiling stuff, you're creating a 2/2 wolf, which
Mm-hmm.
is very relevant for this next one. End Race Forerunner is a 5, 6, 7, 8 mana cost 7/7. He has vigilance, he has trample, he has haste, and when he enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain vigilance and trample till the end of turn. So now all those little 2/2s are 4/4s with trample
Nasty.
and vigilance. Plus you have all these
Nasty.
other big things that you have, like your 9/7 Greater Gargadon, and they're all going to get vigilance and trample
Woohoo!
and +2/+2. So he's a nice little game winner usually.
Definitely. Ignite the Future for 3 and a red. This is a sorcery that says exile the top 3 of your top 3 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards, so that gives you a little more time. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may play cards this way without paying their mana cost. What? So that means it has flashback of 7 and a red. So you can cast this once it hits your graveyard. You can cast it from there and have that craziness happen. 0 mana cost. Whew.
Yeah,
Goodness.
it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because then it's from Exile too. Primeval
Yeah.
Bounty for 6. It's an enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 3/3 green beast creature token. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put 3 1/1 counters on target creature you control. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life. Crazy card
I
from
love that card.
Jumpstart, and it's
Yeah.
great in this deck.
Yeah. Sandworm Convergence. This is my. I'm gonna pull this out because Leslie's playing her Flyers card. This is for 6 and 2 green, an enchantment that says creatures with flying can't attack you. So stay away from me or planeswalkers that I control. And at the beginning of my end step, I'm going to make a worm and eat you.
Mm-hmm.
It's mean.
That's crazy, the number of worms, and they're 5/5s, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Passionate Archaeologist is a legendary enchantment background. So remember we were talking backgrounds
There we
before.
go.
If you put this with that other guy, now your deck is the same color because this one happens to be red. Commander creatures you own have, whenever you cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So now you're casting stuff. It changes the deck a little bit if you decide to use this and that guy for your commander, but you're still being able to do lots and lots of damage. Yeah. Now, that's my cat. I hope everyone enjoys the scratching.
The other last video had my dog barking, Yeah. It's real. We're real people. Now, Feshni. This is a horrible looking beast demon, I have to say. 5 and a red, a 4/6 flying, weird looking thing, let's just say. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, you get to copy it, though. Holy crap. You may choose new targets for the copy.
Oh, gosh.
If it's a permanent spell, that copy gains haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this permanent. But who cares? You're getting in for a lot of damage. Like, what if it's a tally or something? Like, oh my god.
Yeah, you just get a free tally for a turn and gains haste.
And that will,
a tally's legendary, so.
No, but what if you bring, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's just crazy.
It is crazy
to think about. It's crazy.
Yeah. And we have another adventure card.
A new one.
Lynn Callie Hunter. So it's got a sorcery on it for 2, and you can exile target creature card from your graveyard. Until the end of turn, you may cast that card. So getting things back from your graveyard is always good. All of those, creature? Yeah. And then you can cast it from exile, and it is then a 7/7 trample beast for 7. And there's nothing wrong with that. So it triggers your commander.
Oh my gosh. And once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a creature you cast. What?
Oh, I thought that was italicized. So I was like, there's just flavored text on there. So I was like, oh, it's just, for once per turn, you pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a creature spell.
For those exiled cards that you're bringing in.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
So and then Vivian have things in exile and cast them for free.
Because Vivian is going to help you do that whenever you want, because when she's on the battlefield, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash. I mean, why not? And she's a +1 until your next turn. One of your creatures gets vigilance and reach protection. Her -2 is look at the top 3 cards of your library, exile one of them face down, and put the rest on the bottom of your library, and then for as long as it remains exiled, you may look at that card and cast it if it's a creature card. So there's a great way to get that casting your creatures out at flash speed and have your commander fire. Woohoo! All right.
Awesome. That's it for that section. On to the next section. I've got to introduce all of them this time.
Yeah, I guess
Other cards on theme. So these are kind of your support cards, other win conditions, basically just things that support your deck. They maybe are conditional, so they're in this section. And they also might just be kind of cards that are filler. So if you're tweaking, some of these cards might be ones that you might want to get rid of, but not this one. This one is a great little card, but it is conditional. That's why it's in here. So Aura Phoenix for 6 is a flying Cascade, and whenever you cast a spell with Cascade, return Aura Phoenix from your graveyard to your hand. So there was 2 other cards right now with Cascade only, right? So you might want to add more Cascade to this deck, and I think there's some of that in this support. And just a reminder, Cascade, you just kind of flip over cards from the top of your library until you find one that costs less, and then you get to cast that one free. So
And this next card will help you with that whole situation, but you'd have to have that out as well. So Wild
Mm-hmm.
Magic Sorcerer, it's a 4/3 for 4. And the first spell you cast from exile each turn has Cascade. So again, it's kind of conditional. You have to have everything kind of set up. But with this deck, you probably are going to have some of those things. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully.
Lots of triggers to keep track of with this
Yeah,
deck.
exactly.
Arasta, the Endless Web, for 4 is a 3/5. She has reach, and whenever an opponent casts an instance or a sorcery spell, you get to create a little 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. So it's going to help you with tokens and just going wide on the board and having some little
Yeah,
blockers.
a really good defender card.
Mm-hmm.
The Battle Mammoth, this beautiful 6/5 trampling thing for 3 and 2 green, as trample, of course. Whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. Sweet. So it does have foretell, so you can play it for cheaper. Yeah, so it's actually, but the permanent, your permanents have to be targeted. So if they're not trying to get rid of you, it's not going to happen. But still
Mm-hmm.
a big 6/5 trampler.
Yeah. And Hornet Queen is another one that creates some little nice blockers for you. 7 mana cost for a 2/2, but she's flying in Death Touch, and whenever she enters the battlefield, you create 4/1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and Death Touch. So really, you get 5 Death Touchers for 7 mana.
It's pretty
So,
awesome. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Love Struck Beast. This is one of my favorite cards. This is Beauty and the Beast here. It has the Heart's Desire on the sorcery side, adventure card. It sends it off. So you make a little white bell, and then you get to, for 3, play the Beast. And yeah, but he can only attack if you have Bell there because he can't function without the love of his life.
As should be.
Yeah.
Mana Gorger Hydra for 3 is a little 1/1, and whenever a player casts a spell, put a 1/1 counter on Mana Gorger Hydra. So that's any spell they cast, instant,
Mm-hmm.
sorcery, creature, enchantment, whatever. If it goes on the stack, you get a counter.
Yeah. And this is another of the Cascade cards. A Sweet Gum Recluse, a spider that Leslie loves, 4 and 2 green for a 0/3 flash cascading spider. So at a mana cost of 6, that's really helpful actually, with reach. And when it enters the battlefield, you get to put 3/1/1 counters on each of any number of target creatures that entered the battlefield this turn. So, hey, why not?
Gross. Blood
Yeah.
Braid Elf for 2 and Gruel colors. You get a 3/2 with haste and Cascade. Woo, Cascade.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Grumgully the Generous for 1 and a red and a green, a 3/3. This makes your aggro decks more aggro. Each other non human creature you control enters the battlefield with an extra 1/1 counter on it.
Mm-hmm. And Jeskai's Will for 3, you get to choose one. If you control a commander as you cast the spell, you get to choose
Mm-hmm.
both. So the first one is add a red for each card in target opponent's hand. So you just pick whoever has the most cards
Mm-hmm.
in their hand, and that's your target. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. So not only do you get to have a bunch of extra mana, you get to then use it to cast the top 3 cards of your library from Exile. So,
Then we have Light Up the Stage for 2 and a red. And has Spectacle. So you're pretty much always going to play this for Spectacle cost, where you cast it for that cost rather than the more expensive. If opponent has lost life, which you're going to make sure that they lose life, and then you play this card, and you get to exile the top 2 cards of your library until end of your next turn. You can play those cards. Really, really good for this deck.
and then we have Journey to the Lost City, which is
New, I
a
think.
roll some dice cards.
Love
I
it.
love these ones. It is new. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 4 cards of your library. Then you get to roll a d20. And depending on your results, different things happen. If you roll a 1 to 9, you may put a land card from among those cards onto the battlefield. If you roll a 10 to 19, you get to create a 2/2 green wolf creature token, then put a 1/1 counter on it for each creature card among those cards. And then if you roll a nat 20, you put all permanent cards exiled with Journey to the Lost City onto the battlefield then you sacrifice it. So yeah, it's
Oof.
great.
Hope for
Once
that
you roll the 20, you
nat
don't get
20.
it anymore.
Yeah,
But
it goes away.
when it's on the battlefield, you get that every time you have an
Yeah.
upkeep, which is great.
Then we can't have a bunch of adventures without our little Edgewell Innkeeper friend. For
Mm-hmm.
one, it's a 1/1, and whenever you cast a creature spell that has an adventure, you get to draw a card. So here's another card draw that's kind of a conditional type card because it can only happen if you cast a creature spell that has an adventure. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
think about that.
And then for land, our formula says we should have 34. This deck has 39. Now that's very interesting because we do have a lot of benefit from land in this,
Mm-hmm.
especially being able to bring it in from exile or play additional lands per turn. So that's a great thing. You also want to be able to play those cards from exile, so you do want the land on the battlefield. However, when you do have a deck with 39 lands in it, you are going to a lot of times just keep drawing lands or have land in your hand when you want something else. So it's a catch 22. Always play with the deck first before you do it. But if you want to
Yeah.
tweak, taking lands out is usually a good thing. Speaking of tweaking, you have reached that part of the video.
Yes. Thank you for
Shauna,
staying with
what
us.
are what are we going to do with tweaks right now?
Haha. Well, we are going to see what other sorts of exiling cards we can find. And this one is a really, really neat card from the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms
Mm-hmm.
set that just came out. It's Flame Skull, so totally Dungeons and Dragons. It is a skeleton, a 3/1 skeleton that has flying and it can't block. So it's a very, again, aggressive card, but it has rejuvenation, which says when it dies, you get to exile it. And then if you do, you exile the top card of your library as well. So until the end of your next turn, you can play one of those cards. You can either play the Flame Skull again, or you can play the card that got exiled. So it really helps that whole exile thing
Mm-hmm.
easily. Easily. Yeah.
Active Impulse was another one that we thought would help your exile uh, theme that you have going on.
Yeah.
You get to exile the top 3 cards of your library until the end of turn. You may play cards exiled this way. Remembering if you play cards, you still have to pay for their mana cost. However, this says if you cast a spell this way, you still pay its cost. You can play a land this way only if you have an available land play remaining. So if you've already played your land per turn and then you play this, then you won't get to play that extra land. So
Mm-hmm.
again, use your second main phase to play stuff
Yeah,
because you never know what you're going to turn over. So get that land out there and then keep that land in your hand instead.
for sure. Then Robber of the Rich, it goes along with that part of this deck that has that whole stealing things exiled from the
Mm-hmm.
top of someone else's deck. So whenever he's a 2/2 for 2 that has reach and haste, and whenever it attacks, if defending player has more cards in your hand than you get to exile the top card of their library. And then during any turn you attacked with a rogue, you may cast that card. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. So that's a great way to steal something and play it from exile.
Mm-hmm.
Haha.
The other mechanic that we thought might help you with exiling is madness,
Mm-hmm.
because it also puts cards in exile. It doesn't say it on this card, but they are. So 3 and 2 for 3 and 2 green, you get a 4/4 with trample. But if you decide not to play its regular cost, you can discard it. You have to have a way to discard it. You can't
Which your
just say
commander
I'm gonna.
has.
Yes. So, but you have to have a card that says discard a card. So then
Mm-hmm.
you can say, well, I'm going to discard this one. And because I'm discarding it, I'm going to play it for its madness costs instead
Mm-hmm.
before it sits in the graveyard. So instead of putting it in your graveyard, you play it from exile. So then you trigger your commander as well. So,
Yeah, so good.
mm-hmm.
Then we've also got another one that's one of my very, very favorite cards. When my first fell in love with Magic was with this card, Blood Mad Vampire for 2 and a red. It's a 4/1. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you put a 1/1 counter on it. So really, really aggressive card. And I pretty much have always played it first madness cost. So for 2, you get a 4/1. That's gonna do some damage.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
And incorrigible youths. Those incorrigible youths for 5. That's a 4/3.
Yep.
Also, it's haste, it's madness, and so you can cast things from exile, which is great.
Yep. Then we've got just one more madness card for you that is really awesome. It's a worm with trample. Its mana cost, its regular cost is 5 for 4/4, but its madness cost is only 2 and a red. So it's a good one.
Mm-hmm. And there are some new adventure cards as well as some old
Very
adventure
cool.
cards. Adventure cards, you don't have to worry about trying to discard them. So if you're going to add some more exile stuff, adventure is a great choice for you. The first suggestion we have is Monster Manual, which we love. It's first sorcery costs 3. You mill 5 cards, and then you return a creature card milled this way to your hands, so you can get something from the top of your library. Basically, you're scrying or looking. And then you can play it from its adventure zone for 4. And it has this little ability. It's an artifact that you can pay 2 and tap it and put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield.
Stupid.
Just for free. 2
Well,
mana
for
cost
2.
and 2 mana cost and tap it to put anything on the battlefield. Just think about that 10 mana cost creature that you had to suspend.
Uh-huh.
Now you can put it on for free instead of suspending it, which doesn't trigger your exile, but you get it for 2 instead.
Who cares? You're getting it for 2.
I kind of think this should go in this deck no matter what.
I kind of should. Then you can play some of these dragons here. So we've got Amethyst Dragon, but you do want to play their adventure side, probably. I don't know. It depends.
Always, yeah.
Depends on the situation, right?
But you do, because you want them in exile, right?
Yeah. So 4/4 for 4 and 2 red. The sorcery side says it deals explosive crystal, is what the sorcery side is called. It deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. That's handy. And then its other side, for the 6 cost, is flying and haste 4/4.
Mm-hmm. And then the Emerald Dragon for 3, you get to counter a target activated or triggered ability from a non-creature source, which is great because you're playing Gruul colors and everyone's like, oh, they don't have anything to do in response, but you do. You can be like, actually, I'm not going to allow it. I'm not going to allow it. You can do your little blue player thing in green, which is great. Or awesome. And then after you just get a flying trample 4/4. Woo-hoo. So,
Lifecrafter's Bestiary. We love this in green decks. Leslie and I both. It's a 3 cost artifact that says at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay a green and draw a card. So this is a great way to help with that whole card draw thing and scrying to make sure you're getting what you want.
Yeah.
So that's really good.
We found Crystal Ball, which I had never seen before we were looking, and I love this card. It's 3 mana cost. When it's on the battlefield, you can pay 1 and tap it to scry 2, which is just ongoing awesomeness.
Yeah. Augur of Autumn. This is another one that I think is a little bit underestimated. A 2/3 for 1 and 2 green. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. Like, I just love that ability. And you may play lands from the top of your library. So get those lands out of the way so that you can figure out your next plan, like before the other people know what you're doing. You're just such a little sneaky person. But if you have Coven, as long as you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, which you're aggressive, you have lots of stuff, you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. So an extra card, right? So there's, again, kind of card draw sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's an underestimated card.
Very, very. And In Search of Greatness is a fantastic card. For 2, it's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a permanent spell from your hand with converted mana cost equal to 1, plus the highest converted mana cost among other permanents you control, without paying its mana cost. If you can't do that, you just get to scry. So it's good no matter what, this card. And remember, we'll just go back to that stupid 9/7 creature. If he's on the battlefield, his converted mana cost is 10. Everything in your deck is lower than that.
Yeah. Woohoo. So that's it for this time, guys. So thank you so much for sticking around with us. And we are hanging out here with you on YouTube and Twitch. And you can also follow along with us on Facebook and Twitter, as well as Instagram. Let us know what you think about this deck and these other commander decks that have come out too. What would you do? Where would you go with them? How do you like them? And yeah, we'd love to hear what you would do with it, because we'd like to learn from you as well. So that's it for this time. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime,
tap those magic cards. Have fun doing it. Bye, guys.
bye.